Good morning. Welcome back to Coffee and Commiseration with Kay Steinsapir. Or if you're joining for the first time, thank you. Welcome. So happy you're here. I have so much I want to catch up with you guys on today. Eli and I took our trip to Fresno, back to my hometown. I realize he's only been there like a few times in his entire life that he doesn't remember. So he was off from school this past week and he still has another week off. I'm in that ridiculous month-long period where I have the kids on spring break, but no overlap between the two of them. So, I'm tired. I know you all can relate. But I decided to take a little road trip with Eli back to my hometown, back to Fresno. It was great, really good, beautiful weather, beautiful springtime weather. We went to the Fresno Chaffee Zoo. My grandfather, Paul Chaffee, was the zoo director there for many years before he died of melanoma at the young age of 63. I was in seventh grade when he died. And when I say this man has just an incredible legacy, everyone in Fresno knows about Paul Chaffee, my grandfather. He was this man who was just very gentle and a lover of animals, a steward of animals and the environment and the earth, and a teacher. When you would walk through the zoo with him, the animals would recognize him, and they'd get excited like Dax, like our dog does, running to us, but it would be like a rhinoceros or an ape or something. So I grew up spending a lot of time at the Fresno Chaffee Zoo, which is really now like a world-class zoo. It's so nice. If you ever are in the Central Valley, definitely check it out. My step grandmother, Jean Chaffee, created this beautiful play area dedicated to Molly at the zoo. In this new part of the zoo that's like Asian forest or something. I forget the name of it. But it's this whole area pays tribute to the Hmong culture and Vietnamese people. Fresno is a very diverse city. First of all, it's quite a large city. People don't realize that. Very diverse, and I love that about it. And I love that this part of the zoo where Molly's remembered pays tribute to the Hmong community in Fresno, because they were always very discriminated against when I was growing up there and looked down upon. And I had some wonderful Hmong friends that I loved. So I love that, that is sort of changing a bit there. So I have some really interesting things to tell you about the trip. Two parts. One part is, I went back to all the places where I grew up, which was very, very interesting and very, I don't know, healing for me in a way. But also, I met with my dad for the first time in over 10 years. Eli had never met my dad. So that was huge. And I think a lot of people who have difficult relationships with their family members or who are estranged from family members or don't communicate with them, whatever the case may be, will find it interesting. So anyway, let me first tell you about kind of what we did. So I haven't done this really ever. I mean, it was really because my friend Joylene, who I've been friends with since first grade, said to me, like, she mentioned someplace I lived, and I said, "Oh my God, I have no idea what you're talking about. I have no memory of that place." And it felt weird to me. Like, how could I have lived in a place for years of my life? And I wasn't that young. We were like in middle school. And I don't remember it. Like, that felt really like unsettling for me. So I got Joylene in the car. We drove all around to the various places where I lived, including that place. And it was really in a time where I'm feeling just completely ungrounded. Is that a word? I think so. Just really disconnected. displaced, not in my home. It took us, and we still never achieved this, but it took us a very long time to feel any sense of normalcy after Molly died. And then our sort of new normal was completely upended by the fire situation that we're now living through. It's only been 3 months, y'all, and I'm so tired. The fire situation is exhausting and overwhelming and daunting. We still don't have water and power at our house in the Palisades, and we won't be able to go back and live there for years. So it's so overwhelming. So at a time where I'm feeling very just like no sense of grounding, like there's like I feel like I'm walking on shifting sand at all times. It was really good for me to go back to where I came from, and where I came from is so different than where I am now. And it was interesting to go back and see where I lived. And we moved around a lot. So my mom was 18 when she had me. My dad was 5 years older than her. And neither of them were like equipped to be parents. I was their only child. They divorced when I was 6, and my mom went on to get married 5 more times. My dad had various like girlfriends, and then he remarried once. So I bounced around between the two of them all of my childhood. So with my mom, I mostly lived with my mom after the divorce from like the ages of, 6 to 13, maybe. I was at that time like seeing my dad every other weekend, typical kind of divorced, at least at the time, that was sort of typical for a divorced family. I saw him like every other weekend, and sometimes, he wouldn't come on the weekends. He was supposed to get me. So during those years with my mom went through a real like hard partying phase of her life and got into drugs, and everything sort of spiraled from there. So we lived in some really, really rough places. And I realized that even more going back and seeing them. I can't say when I returned to these various places where I lived that all the memories were bad. There were some good, happy memories that kind of came back to me when I went back to them. But I was definitely struck by just, you know, the and it hasn't really changed, which is interesting. If you go to Fresno, it's like there's a whole area, like it's called Clovis. Like there's this whole huge part of this part of the state that's booming and growing and all of that. And then there's kind of the part I grew up in, which has just stayed the same and gotten worse, I think. So, we went around, we saw these places, and it was good for me to just kind of remember and show Eli, and also for him to see, like, this is how your mom grew up. This is the trailer park I lived in. This is the apartment complex I lived in. This is the tiny little house I lived in. And I moved around all the time. I didn't have anything. And I was really struck by, I told you that one house I lived in where I walked to the bus stop every day by that man who was in the window exposing himself nude to me. And I just kind of shrugged that off and kept walking as like a 7th grader. So I went to that house, and then we drove to the bus stop where I would catch the bus every day to go to school. And it's far. It was not close. And I think about like my kids, and I'm so much more protective and aware of like where they are and all of that than my parents were. And it's sort of a Gen X. I think I'm a Gen Xer. I always forget, which maybe is characteristic of Gen X people. So yeah, it was definitely characteristic of the time in which we grew up. And then when you add to it, like having parents who were like abusing substances and just completely fucking checked out, we were just on our own completely. Like, so Anyway, it was very good to be back. We had the combination of visiting the zoo with family, which was really nice, and we saw all these wonderful baby animals and all of that. And then I did my tour of my old stomping grounds. I went back to my old high school, Central High School, way out in the country. I went to this rinky-dink little high school, and it was so weird to be back. I haven't been back since I graduated, and my 30-year anniversary is coming up. Reunion is coming up this summer. Yeah, so super weird to go back to a place that in your mind is so much bigger, and then you go back and you're like, oh my god, this is like the dinky little quad area and the little snack store that we used to go to. Um, anyway, it was like going back to a completely different version of myself, um, in a different lifetime. Even it feels so incredibly far removed, because it is so far removed from where I am now and all the various iterations of myself that I've lived since then. And I mean, yeah, 30 years is a long time since high school, but 30 years is not that long to feel like you've lived through so many like massive life changing things. And you are, so far removed from where you were. Most of you, I mean, you obviously know about my cancer battle and Molly, and in the middle of the pandemic, losing her, and then our town burning down. I mean, it's just been so much. And that leads me to the second part of what I want to share with you, which I think will, I hope, be interesting and maybe helpful to some of you. So the other part of my story is that my family really fell apart. And I know a lot of people can relate to that. It happened to me in a major way. As I said, my parents divorced when I was very young. My grandparents on my mom's side were kind of the ones who really kind of stabilized me and helped raise me when I was young. And then when they died, everything really fell apart. My grandfather, who was the zoo grandfather, who died when I was in middle school, was wonderful, but I was never as close to him. I didn't know him as well. He would go and visit Africa and come back with all his slideshows of like the birds of Africa, and I was a kid, so I thought that was so boring, and what I wouldn't give to go back in time and see that now, because I'm obsessed with birds as well. Anyway, my family dynamics were super weird growing up, and they got more and more dysfunctional and chaotic as I got older. And eventually, I had no contact with either of my parents, and I haven't seen either of them in a decade at least. And Eli's never met my mom or my dad, and he's almost 9, except for he met my dad this past weekend. So with regard to my mom really suffers from like serious mental illness at this point. And I don't know if it's kind of the chicken or the egg situation. Like, did she already have these problems, and then the drugs, were her effort to self-medicate? Or did the drugs exacerbate? I don't know. Did the drugs cause something? I have no idea. But whatever happened, it's probably a combination of both. Whatever happened with her, she has become someone who you literally cannot have a relationship with, because it's just so toxic and deeply, deeply dysfunctional. So we bought her, she became homeless at some point, like almost, I don't know, 10 years ago. And it never had to be, the first time when she left my grandfather's house where she had been living, she told me she was leaving and she was just going to go and live out on the streets. And I told her that was crazy and she needed to tell me where she was. And she was sending me and my sister's photos of like her living in an abandoned building with a shopping cart and smoking cigarette butts that she picked up off the ground and eating out of the trash can. I mean, all of this happened like overnight. Like she went from being with my grandfather at his place to leaving and like adopting this lifestyle. And I was pregnant with Eli at the time. And I said, you need to tell me where you are. I'm coming from LA to Fresno. I'm bringing you to LA, getting you into treatment, and, a stable situation and on your feet. And she would not do it. She refused. She just wanted me to send money. And I was not going to do that anymore. I'd already done that. And I'd already seen how that turned out. So eventually, so shortly after that, I was diagnosed with breast cancer, and I had been working with a therapist for years at this point who was like, you have got to stop having contact completely in order to survive this. And my cancer was aggressive. And I remember like as soon as John came home when I was diagnosed, and he came home, he said, your fucking family did this to you. And we know, like I had no risk factors. I was 39. I was very healthy. Otherwise, but my doctor said I had had this cancer for a long time before it was diagnosed, and it was spreading really rapidly and had already spread to my lymph nodes very significantly. And I know that the trauma that I lived with during my life growing up was a contributor, no doubt in my mind, was a significant driver in what led to my illness. So I was like, all right, I can't anymore. I have to just focus on getting better. And I did. And I focused all of my effort and energy and time and everything I had in me to surviving that illness, because I was not leaving my kids if I could help it. So I did everything Western medicine had to offer, and then some. I pushed my doctors to give me more treatment beyond standard of care, and I got that, and I did that, and I did everything Eastern medicine had to offer as well, because I was just like, and sometimes, by the way, sometimes you can do all of that and it still doesn't work. Like I had friends who did all of the things and they still died. So I'm not giving myself any credit. Not saying I was stronger or better or a warrior or whatever, but I did everything in my power. And in my case, I'm still here. And I know very well that it could be different, that I could not be here. And I know very well that that could be the case. I have a lifetime risk of recurrence that is about 30%, that my cancer can recur at any time. So I live with that. But I just basically had to cut off contact for a long time. Then I started paying my mom's rent when we could afford it. She moved to Arkansas. She was living in some, finally she got off the streets and was living in a little, slum apartment in Little Rock. I started paying the rent so I could help her in some way without actually having contact with her. Then I decided, you know what, I don't want to pay rent to this slumlord. Real estate is inexpensive in Arkansas relative to here, certainly. So we bought a little rental, little duplex near the University of Arkansas in Fayetteville, which is very nice, nicer place than my mom had ever lived in her entire life. Put her there, no expenses for her. And I was ready to get her set up with help, with doctors, with mental health professionals. She had her teeth knocked out. Someone punched her in the face while she's living on the streets, and she has no teeth in her front teeth. I was trying to get that fixed for her. All of this. But of course it didn't work out. Of course she left. She was there for a very short period of time, and then went back to living on the streets. So that's my mom. My dad, which is, kind of what I wanted to talk about today, is a different story. So my dad was always kind of, after my parents' divorce, my dad got a job with the city of Fresno. So he had like a stable job. My mom, my stepdad, various stepdads, they didn't. They were not like normal people with steady lives, put it that way. But my dad was always kind of the more stable one, and he lived in you know decent home and all of that. So um, I went to live with him when I was like in middle school, then went back with my mom. I told you I was like flip flopping between the two of them because my dad was a bachelor. He lived with two roommates. They had all these girlfriends. I mean, it was not a suitable place for a young girl, even though it was a decent home with like food in the refrigerator and things like that, which was not the case elsewhere with my mom. Was not always the case, I should say. With my mom, I had two younger sisters who were 11 and 13 years younger than me. And I was trying to parent them and my mom at the same time. And so I was the eldest, and I was trying to take care of everybody. And I did what I could, but it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to keep my sisters safe. It wasn't enough to keep everything afloat. So I would kind of go back and forth. When things got too bad with my mom, I would go with my dad, and then I'd go over there, and he didn't know what to do with me because I was a young teenager. He was a bachelor guy and living with his friends and all of that. So I kind of went back and forth. But that home that I mentioned last time, the one that became a meth lab and blew up, that was his house. And that was kind of the best place I ever lived in, and the most consistent place I ever lived in. And we did go back by there when we drove around, and it's a totally different house now. And that whole neighborhood has gone way down and is not a good area. But it was interesting to see it, rebuilt totally different from the one that blew up. So my dad, eventually my dad remarried. I won't get in. It's a whole saga with my dad and my stepmother. I won't get into all the details, but it was my mom and my stepmother have some similarities. Both very strong women, and my dad's a very weak man, and um, it was challenging for sure with my dad and his relationships, and the woman he ultimately married was very, very rocky, especially when I was a teenager. So eventually, I just didn't have contact with my dad. I didn't fit into his new life with his new wife and her kids and his grandkids and all of that. So my dad only saw Molly and Nate like a handful of times when they were growing up. He didn't come to our wedding. We went from being very close because I ultimately did live with him for most of my high school. When I went to that little rural high school out in the country, I was living with him. And so we did have some good years in there together, and we were close. And then we went from that to like really having no contact, except for like whenever we would have contact, it would lead to blow up fights ultimately. And it never took long. And every time we would be in contact, it would be like relitigating all of the many, many disputes that happened over the years. Those would all come to the surface, and we would have to go over them all, and we would never, it would never lead to anywhere good. All right, so now I'm coming to my point. So while we were in Fresno, Eli, my sweet, sweet boy, who just brings so much joy and happiness and light to our lives. I can't imagine what our lives would be like if we didn't have Eli. And we almost didn't have Eli, by the way. Molly and Nate were very close in age. We thought we were done having kids. We had gotten rid of all the baby stuff. We were on to the next phase. But I just had this overwhelming feeling that I could not shake, that another child was meant to come into our lives. And I felt it. Like I could feel it was like a little knock at the door that became like a pounding on the door. Like, I'm coming. Like I'm here and I want to come. And it's so interesting because he says the same thing. He walked up to John when he was like 4 and talked about when he was waiting to come and join our family, and how Molly cut in front of him, and then Nate went, and then he was still left waiting. So it's wild that he would say things like that, and without any prompting from me. I never told him anything. He was so little anyway, he wouldn't have understood. But and I felt that. Like, I felt so strongly that he was meant to come, or somebody was meant to come into our family. And I could not escape it. It would not, it was relentless, this feeling. I could not get away from it. Um, and he, by the way, very well may have saved my life, because after I was pregnant with him, it was when I was breastfeeding that I felt that lump. Um, and you're never closer to your breast than when you're nursing, right? Because you're constantly, have your boobs out and you're feeding another being. And I noticed that lump while I was breastfeeding. He was only a few months old. So I think he saved me and us in many, many ways. And I'm just immensely grateful for him, and for Nate, and for Molly, obviously. But I'm talking about Eli because of what happened this past weekend. So while we're in Fresno, we met Jean, my step-grandmother, out at the zoo, and my aunt, Denise. Now, my aunt Denise used to be best friends with my mom in high school, and she's my dad's sister, my dad's younger sister. Now, my dad's estranged from her, too. He became estranged from a lot of people. When he remarried and all of that, he basically ended his prior life. And she's also on the outs, and has been for like 20 years. But when we were at the zoo, Eli realized, oh, who's this woman? She's my aunt. Well, how is she my aunt? Oh, she's married to, she's his great aunt, I should say. She's my aunt. And he realized, like, well, how is she related? Oh, well, she's the sister of my dad. And he, of course, is asking, like, well, who's this guy? Why haven't I met my grandpa? And I just said, would you like to meet your grandpa? And he said, yeah, I would. I would love to meet my grandpa. And I said, you know what? Okay. And I texted my dad. And mind you, the last communications I've had with my dad were very negative. Yeah, very negative. I've written about it. If you follow me on Substack, I've written extensively about what happened when Molly was in the hospital, and how things went very poorly with my dad. They were very poor with him leading into that, and they also were not good while she was in the hospital and afterwards. And so I've written a lot about that, which, I hope you all will read if you're interested, on Substack. Yeah, I just thought, you know what, if he wants to meet his grandfather, he should. And I should facilitate that. So I text my dad and I said, hey, we're in town. Would you like to have breakfast? And he responded right away, very, very positively, wanting to do that. And so we did. The very next day, we met him and my stepmother, because my dad doesn't go anywhere without my stepmother. And that was always part of the challenge. It was always like we couldn't have a conversation even on the phone without like being on speaker with her there. And, that was always difficult. So we meet for breakfast, and I don't know, you guys, it's like, I always said and I still say this about my family, like when I'm not in communication with them, when I don't have them as part of our lives, I've always said, it's not for right now. It's not forever. I don't know what the future holds, right? None of us know what the future holds. And I mean, my life has been so insane. It has unfolded in ways I could have never, ever imagined or predicted. So I am out of the prediction business. And I always say, it's not for right now. And with my dad, it's been not for right now I don't even know the last time I saw my dad. It's been over 10 years. It's been that way for a long time. And all of a sudden, I don't know, my sisters, my half sisters, Nikki and Michelle, they just lost their dad, who was my stepfather. Um, as I said, I had a lot of different stepfathers. He was the one in my life the longest, and he was not a good figure in my life. But he's my sister's father, and my heart is broken for them that he is gone. And I really want to be a support to them during their loss. And um, so I think the specter of death is, I hate to say this, it sounds very morbid, but the reality that time is limited is something I'm very keenly aware of, because we lost Molly, because I've lost many friends to cancer, because my sisters just lost their dad. And as imperfect as he was, which he was an imperfect person, as we all are, but for me, he was a source of like significant trauma in my life. And I know that he was not perfect for them either. But I see, like, wow, he's gone. Like, he's gone, and they don't have a father in this world anymore. And when you don't have a father or a parent in this world anymore, that's a big deal, right? So I think that was on my mind leading into this. And I've also been listening to that book I told you about, the Let Them theory. And I think it's amazing. I highly, highly recommend that book. And just the idea that I've taken away from it is like, listen, you're not going to change other people. Like, I'm not going to change my father or my stepmother ever. My dad's 70 now. You're definitely not going to change an older person, right? And there's so much that I disagree with. My dad is a big Trump supporter. He always has been. I'm on the opposite. I wouldn't say I'm on the opposite. I'm not like I would say I'm a raging moderate, like the podcast I told you about last time with Scott Galloway and Jessica Tarlov. I'm in that category. I'm very passionate. I'm very involved in politics, but I'm pretty centrist. And the insanity of the left over the past whatever years has made me veer more towards the center, and even sometimes center right. But anyway, I digress. So I realized, like, okay, I'm not going to change these people. They're never going to change. And before, the times I would get together with them, I would have a hard time, and I would not do a good job with this, of kind of not reacting to things my stepmother would say or do that would bother me, right? I would show my expression on my face, which, I often do. And this time I was like, I'm not letting anything bother me. I'm just letting them, let them be them. They are not changing. And we just had a really nice time. And it felt like, and my stepmother started to get into, she actually apologized about kind of how she behaved after Molly passed. And I just accepted her apology. And I said, listen, let's just leave the past in the past. Like, let's finally leave the past in the past. I don't want to even get into it, because, as I said, when we open that door, and we've done this many, many times over the decades, right? We start relitigating. We go back. My dad and my stepmother, if we let them, like, they will go back to my cousin Lisa's wedding, which happened over 20 years ago, and some issue happened at that wedding. They didn't even involve me, by the way. But they start there, and then we start litigating everything that happened in between. And oh my God, it leads to nowhere good. So I feel like, I don't know if you've ever seen this cartoon. I have it in my mind, of this like person that's pulling behind them a giant boulder, right? And it's like, the idea is, I don't even remember what it said, but I picture this. It's like, why are you lugging this enormous, enormous, heavy boulder behind you? And it's just so heavy, and it's so tiring, and it's exhausting to carry this weight with you everywhere you go. And I feel like I've carried like this heaviness around with me my entire life, the trauma of, being this little girl who was a child of these like young divorced people who went on to have these crazy relationships with people. And like, I just wasn't cared for. And in many times I was abused, literally physically abused, emotionally abused for sure. Like, I've carried this with me and my inability to protect my sisters who I love so much. And, one of my sisters is not well. Like, she's not well. She hasn't been well ever. She's gotten really heavy into substance abuse. And it's like, that's a real source of pain for me. Um, so, I carry this heaviness with me and I just have to let it go. I can't carry it anymore. And I don't know, sometimes it's just so hard to do it. I don't know, but sometimes it's like for me, like it's like the switch flipped and I'm finally able to just, at least with regard to my dad, I would, and at least in this moment, I can't say it'll be forever. Who knows? I'm out of the prediction business, but at least for this time, at least with Eli, and he really enjoyed meeting his grandfather. And my dad really loves seeing Eli, and they do have a resemblance. Eli's blonde, like my dad, and it was really nice. My dad's not in great health. He's not like dying or anything, but he's had cancer twice. He's got rheumatoid arthritis. It causes him a lot of pain. Like, he's not in great health. Um, he has issues with his liver. Like, he did a lot of drugs in his youth as well. Got hepatitis, like, all of this. So he's not in great health. It was just really, really nice to see him meet his grandson and them have a moment together. And I felt really good that I was just able to sit there and enjoy a meal and not be triggered by my stepmother and not react to her and just extend kindness to her. And honestly, it's kind of all it took. I just was ever not able to do it in the past. I wish I had been, but I just wasn't really able to extend grace to her and kindness to her. And because of that, she would react to me and get more, hyped up and insecure and do things that would aggravate me. And by just being non-reactive, like, just let them be who they are. Don't expect anything and don't expect them to change because they're not. By just employing that mode, at least in this one breakfast, like, I was able to have a really nice time. And honestly, I feel lighter afterwards. And Eli was able to meet his grandfather. And, hopefully the door is open to more of that. And we don't have to have a relationship that, we're in each other's lives all the time. I don't know that that's ever going to happen. But like, when you go through life estranged from your parents, it hurts. It's painful. And sometimes you have to do that for your own protection and sanity. Like me with my mom, I don't think I can ever have my mom in my life because it's so toxic and so bad. And she is literally like living in an alternate reality. Like, so you can't even talk to her because she's like, her experience is not the same as the rest of ours. So you're just dealing with like a separate set of facts and circumstances that aren't real. So I literally cannot have her in my life. And so I know for those of you who might be listening to this and thinking like, good for you, like being able to have, a meal with your dad and maybe, have some sort of semblance of a relationship again. I can't do that because my parents are, like my mom is. I get it. I have a parent like that too. And it's so painful. I just got an email from this company. I actually appreciated it. It's called Skylight. It, has, it's like they have those digital frames, but also a calendar. So it helps me keep the calendar, which, by the way, I don't have since the fires. So I'm completely just every day, just winging it, just going through, trying to do as much as possible, and get through the day. And I have no idea kind of what's happening from one day to the next. It's very disconcerting. But it's kind of all I can do at the moment. So Skylight sends this email saying, Mother's Day and Father's Day is coming up. Like, we know as a company, this is difficult for a lot of people. If you want to opt out of emails about this, just let us know, opt out, which I think is nice because I know from personal experience that these holidays are very hard for a lot of people. And it's so, people don't talk about this because, we don't talk about grief enough in general, but people don't talk about how difficult it is to go through life with this unseen grief of the loss of a loved one who is alive, but can't be part of your life. Whether it's a parent, like in my case, both of my parents have been out of my life for many years, and I've carried that around with me. As I said, that heavy, heavy boulder, which I can't say it's completely gone, clearly, but I've been able to lighten it a bit. And there are people, I know many people who have children who they can't have a relationship with because their child is destructive and they've tried to help them and they are maybe addicted or whatever the case may be. And they go through life with this terrible ache and pain and grief that is unseen. And that's tragic. And oftentimes these holidays like Mother's Day and Father's Day really, really hit that, what Eckhart Tolle calls the pain body, that nerve of, just immense pain that we carry around inside of us, is really triggered by these holidays. So I say all of this just to recognize that, that I see you, if that's you, in any capacity. And I think we should talk more about that, right? Like, what is it like to have people in our lives who we don't have a relationship with, and how we don't really recognize that form of grief. And sometimes we may never be able to have them in our lives again. I mean, I, for years, have, every time the phone rings, for years, or a text comes through now, there is a part of me that fears that I'm going to find out that either my mom or my sister was found dead somewhere. And that is awful. That is an awful, awful feeling and way to go through life. And that is my reality because we have substance issues and just a lack of stable living situations and being in violent situations. I told you my mom has been beat up. Like, I mean, literally with my mom, I can't even believe she's still alive, to be honest. I showed my doctor a picture of my mom, and she said, "Oh my God, like she's abused her body so much for so long. It's remarkable she's even alive." And so I have that sense of dread every time somebody contacts me, which now is very frequent, that maybe that's going to be what I find out. So if that's you, if you can relate to that, I'm so sorry. And I relate to that, and send you a lot of love. So not to end on a downer, because I know that's quite heavy. Our little Eli, like, what a miracle. And just so, we had the best time in Fresno. We had so much fun. We brought the dog with us. We went to a restaurant and we asked if he could sit on the patio. And they were like, "Yeah, we have a wait on the patio, but if you want, you can just come inside." And so we were like, okay, why not? So he sat at a booth, Dex, and, we just had a great time. So it's like all of these things coexist. And there's still, despite all of the difficulty in life, and it is immense for so many of us, and there's so much uncertainty, and the ground feels like it's shifting under our feet. there is still so much to be excited about, to wake up for in the morning and to enjoy and to anticipate, things we just don't expect. A lot of like one of the things they say, Mel says in the Let Them book, is like some of your favorite people haven't even come into your life yet. I think about that with regard to Eli. Like, we didn't know, he was coming, and yet he came and he changed everything. So there are people that are going to come into your life that are going to change everything. And there are experiences that you're going to have that are beautiful and worth living for and make life worth living. So I'll leave you with that. I hope you have a great weekend. We are going to look at some places that we will hopefully find a new place to live and be there more for a longer period of time. We need more stability. We're here only for a few more months and we've loved it. It's been wonderful. Our landlord's been great, but we're off to our next place. Like many of my friends affected by the fire, we've all moved multiple times now. And it's a lot. So we're hoping to find our next place and hope it's great and hope we can get in there and get settled and the kids can have their own rooms and a bed like, that they don't share, all of this. So, we're off to do that, and it's Passover. We're off to Passover Seder and Hag Sameach. Hope you have a meaningful Passover for all of my Jewish family and friends. And obviously we're thinking and sending so much love to the hostage families. And we always are, and especially this Passover. None of us are free until all of us are free. And send you tremendous love. Hope you have a great weekend.